Welcome to Healthcare Quality and Risk Matters. Wondering about patient safety, quality, and risk management, but aren't sure who to ask or were afraid to ask? Well, you're in the right place. We've created a safe and judgment-free space to explore these critical topics to leave you informed and inspired to make a positive impact on healthcare. So, let's learn and grow together because healthcare matters.
Well, welcome everybody to the May installment of Healthcare Quality and Risk Matters. I am Gary Bierc, the CEO of Aperitisoft Healthcare, and I am joined by my esteemed colleagues, Rob Santamoor, our Chief Operating Officer, and Dr. Timothy Brown, who is our Vice President of Healthcare Solutions. Rob has an incredible background. He's got 20 years experience in healthcare. More than half of that has been in quality and risk. He is a registered nurse and has spent time bedside in all types of situations. Rob gives us a great perspective on how healthcare quality works on both sides of the equation, not just from the administrative side, but also from the nursing side. And he will be on the hot seat today, being our team registered nurse. And we have a nickname for Rob. He is the Encyclopedia Rob Tanica, because anything there is to know about healthcare quality and risk, Rob knows that he has that much experience. And we've got Dr. Timothy Brown. That's right. He has a PhD in hospital administration. He also has an MBA. Over 15 years experience in hospital administration from all different perspectives. Timothy gives us a incredible experience on understanding how all this stuff translates into the business of being in healthcare, and wouldn't be the same without him. And I am the odd duck out. I am not a healthcare guy. I am a risk management guy. I've got some 40 years experience in risk management, including being a pioneer in enterprise-wide risk management. So when it gets down to the risk questions, I'm the guy that seems to chime in every single time. And guys, look, I am excited about this month's installment because we get a chance to talk about nursing and about how quality has nurses, but have the nurses back. And this has been a thing for me for many months now. I know we've talked about it, that I've got family that are nurses. Rob is a nurse, and it seems more and more pressure is being placed on nurses to do the job of quality. And I think today would be great to get into an understanding of how this interchange should work in a harmonic relationship. Would that be a good way of describing it, Rob?
I love that.
There needs to be a harmonic relationship between the two. For you guys out there who have never been on our podcast, it's a pretty simple format. We're going to begin by what we would call incident of the month. Rob this month doesn't have an incident though, but he has some very important statistics for nurses that I think would be a good tee-off for the rest of our conversation. We will then transition into what we call Minute Matters. Minute Matters is where we are going to be firing questions out at each other, probably most towards Rob today. But the person who being asked the question has exactly 1 minute to answer before we move on to the next question. And then we'll wrap it up with the last word. And then hopefully open it up to you guys to answer any of the questions that are out there. So right now, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Go ahead and go into the chat or wherever you're communicating with us. Tell us where you're from, maybe your name and where you're from. We'd like to know that. But also be ready to ask any questions you might have throughout the podcast. You can throw comments out at us as well. If you have some things or experiences you want us to read out to the rest of us that support some of the comments that are being made during the podcast, please do. So with that, Rob, we're throwing it back at you now for the incident of the month or the stats of the month, whatever we're going to call it this month. But what do you got for us?
So I read a few articles from the American Bar Association. There's on the impact of risk incidents, and litigation associated with or as it impacts nursing. Some of the really alarming points were that 18% of all of the malpractice suits named nurses or were directly at nurses. That's almost 1 in 5.
Wow.
Wow.
And I know years ago, nurses were named or they were mentioned, but they were not brought there's up on charges, or there was no criminalization of the human error that was associated with caring for a human being. And that was the other article that I read that was extremely alarming, and really made me think how important quality, risk, and compliance are for
Hmm.
nurses to protect themselves, because nurses are being criminally charged. And some are not just facing losing their license or their ability to provide for themselves, or their families, but they're facing jail time
Oh my goodness.
because
Wow.
of human error. And if we're not setting our nurses up for success with strong systems of quality, strong risk management that is a part of the core culture of the organization, in giving nurses the opportunity to document really well. There's what happened, there's before, during, and after an incident. The nurses are not supported later, and that could put them in jail.
Hmm.
Well, why don't we move right into Minute Matters off that point? What do you think, Timothy?
I
And
think that the staggering. Go ahead.
yeah, I was like, why don't you fire out a question? Your first question. I can't wait to ask a question, but I want to let you go first.
Sure, I'll jump in. Thanks, Ron, for bringing in those important stats. The biggest thing that jumped out to me was that 18% of malpractice events involving the nursing personnel. Being that, most hospital organizations, unfortunately, are sued for some uneventful event almost every day, if we think about it from our
Yeah,
conversations
true.
and understanding. This is a major portion of the overall workforce that's doing the work, that's actually caring for patients, that is really the face of the organization, if you want to say, of those everyday interactions that happen for the organization. So, Rob, I guess my first question to you would be, can you share maybe some specific examples of how nursing practices have improved patient outcomes? And then we can kind of talk about some of those issues beyond that after that.
Yeah, so nursing is the end all for there's your some of your high risk points, right? So your treatments, your medications,
Hmm.
there's and frankly your case management, your collaboration, right, between different specialties. There's so nursing increases the quality there's of care and patient outcomes. There's through the standards that they are supposed to uphold. And that's a very vague answer, and I'm going to take more than a minute on purpose. There's so you can buzz me, but I'm going to keep going. Uh,
It's a
and
big
the
question.
nurses are charged with so much responsibility as the middleman in the healthcare picture. So nurses are responsible to make sure that the CNAs have enough support to get their work done. Are the patients getting turned? Are they getting bathed? Are we getting appropriate skin care completed so we're not developing hospital acquired pressure injuries? Or catheter care, so we're not acquiring hospital acquired, there's UTIs from the catheter. There's, but also from the physicians, right? So both sides of their practice. You have a pulmonologist writing an order that would immediately contradict what renal is writing for an order. And they are contraindicated. And it's the nurse's responsibility to make sure that that patient does not receive an inappropriate medication. There's Regardless of what the physician orders, they will have to follow up and get clarification and stop some pretty horrendous things from happening to that patient. So they are the middleman for all things quality and risk for that patient. They are that patient risk manager. They are that patient's quality improvement officer. They are responsible to make sure that that patient leaves safe and sound.
This
Wow.
is fascinating because we have said it before. All those responsibilities that you're talking about are their primary job, right? That they have a lot to do.
So
Then
wonderful.
on top of it, it seems that in current systems that are in certain hospitals, ones that are struggling with quality and risk, that often the nurse is asked to do the quality and risk management
Mhm.
job as well, at least in the front end of incident reporting.
Yep.
Um, which leads me to a real big question. If you were going to name, the top few reasons why nurses often are being brought into these cases as being the fall guy, what would you say are the reasons why that can occur in a
Number
hospital?
Number one, sorry, I did barely even let you finish because like that's right on the tip. I was like, I have a great answer. So one is the culture, right? Does the
Okay.
organization support quality and risk? And have a just culture, meaning they want incidents reported to improve quality and reduce risk. There's organizations that don't support nurses doing incident reports. Nurses don't do incident reports. There's two is nurses having time. So Gary, you just mentioned that yes, those are all the core responsibilities of a nurse plus 20,000 more things.
Right, right.
Any nurses on the line where that will be listening to this later, I know I'm hitting home when I say if you get a chance to take a sip of your water, while you're on shift, or God forbid use the bathroom, you've had a great shift. And that is
Wow.
legit. And that is legit there's many nurses at bedside today, especially with the staffing situation. And number three, is the sense of value that the nurse places in the quality system. So if nurses are placing incidents and follow up is 3 weeks later, or follow up is never, then they don't feel supported and there doesn't have any apparent value to reporting an incident, right? I'm not getting any type of improvement in my workflow or in my patient outcome from things that I'm documenting. So why am I doing it?
You're
And
out of your minute now, Rob.
Wow.
yes, I will stop because I could keep going.
Now, if you've got more to say, I'll hand it off to Timothy to maybe get more out of you. But
I think it's a perfect segue into the next question, but I do want to hit on what you said. You said the culture being the first thing that kind of came out. And as an executive in healthcare, that's really the basis for how your employees are going to interact with your patients overall. If your culture is we don't do quality or risk management well, or we negatively penalize our nurses for any mistake that's made, you're going to see that in the outcome of your overall patients. And if you're seeing unfortunate loss of life, if you're seeing increase in overall lawsuits that are geared towards your nurses, you may want to look at your overall culture. I mean, I think that's an introspective look that any organization should take to say, what is the root cause of really the main issues that we're having for our organization? So I appreciate you, Rob, for bringing that up. I want to steer it kind of towards the leadership now. How do you see the role of chief nursing officers involved in the overall context of enhancing healthcare quality and managing overall risk?
So they're ultimately responsible. Most regulatory standards hold the chief medical and chief nursing officers responsible to meet regulatory and accrediting guidelines. There's as the ultimate authority to do that. And they, of course, then disseminate down and are supposed to set the culture for we have to be compliant and we have to continuously improve. Almost every accrediting body has a continuous improvement protocol written within it to make sure that they are continuously growing, which is fantastic because it reduces the nurse's liability when you have a higher system of quality. And right, that is one of our big concerns on today's topic is that chief nursing officer, there's helping to reduce the liability for the nurses while improving the patient outcomes. Because great patient outcomes, when you have a wonderful patient outcome, you're not very likely to get sued. When you have a bad patient outcome, you're much more likely to get sued, right? You need to have damages to have a legit lawsuit.
Well, I got a question for Timothy.
Sure.
That's kind of playing off of this. You're talking about culture and that sort of thing. In enterprise risk management circles, particularly when you're speaking of how to implement a program, we often talk about governance. How do you govern this program, and what would best fit the culture so that the program will be effective? So I'm wondering, and Rob, you can answer on top of it too if you like. First of all, two parts of the question. One, are hospitals establishing a strong governance structure around quality and risk that can make sure the right things are happening? And then second, if they are, what does that look like? What would be the right governance program? How would that look?
I'm going to give you a perfect world scenario. I will say most hospitals are doing fairly well with this, as you can maybe see from their overall leapfrog scores or any of their overall quality measurements. However,
it's really individual to those individual hospitals. So I can say health system wise, um, healthcare industry wise, yes, we're doing a fairly good job overall with managing quality. However, you have those individual hospitals that could benefit from some, as you mentioned, better governance for how they implement quality. It really involves the right people at the table when you're making these decisions. So having, as we said, kind of retrospectively throughout every conversation, having the quality team or the quality leader at the table with the right data to be able to make the decisions that are needed for quality to be ingrained into your overall culture. If it's not a part of your culture, if it's not one of your core values or even in your mission statement, I would say I wouldn't necessarily want to visit your overall facility across the board either for any type of care. Because if we're not focusing on that quality care, if it's not a focus or focal point for how you do the business that it is you do in healthcare, I would definitely say maybe try a second opinion.
Ideally, every aspect of there's operations that's measurable. They're either subjectively or objectively. There's all of those indicators and metrics would be filtered through a quality pathway, right? You're going to start with like service line operations, and you're going to have those unit directors. There's gathering positive data, negative data, and then trending data. And then you're going to move that there's a more system leadership approach where you're going to have there's quality, risk, and compliance leaders reviewing that data. And holding their service line leaders accountable for continuous improvement. Then that should be filtered up to your executive team. And then that data is then moved into your board for your board minutes and awareness.
Right.
What I see, unfortunately, is variations of that are the bare minimum for the regulatory standards or that offer physicians or the hospital protections. So you have patient safety quality indicators that go through non-disclosure pathways like peer review. There's patient safety quality improvement committees. There's where you can review that data and keep things from public disclosure or even auditor disclosure. That is not systemic quality management when you're just doing the bare minimum. Systemic quality management, when you're having a strong culture, is like we're talking about getting all the right people at the table, having everybody understand that reporting is important and why it's important. And then having the ability and systems in place to ensure adequate follow-up and continuous improvement and risk reduction. And we fail at that in healthcare. We just do. There's not a gentle way to say it. We do.
Yeah.
Fail. Which
now, should we give Rob a question now, Timothy?
I think we can. Maybe he can speak to one of the points from that article that you mentioned, or the statistics that you brought up earlier about the 18% malpractice. There was one particular area that stood out about patient grievances and noting that patients are compliant with their overall maybe guidelines for their health. Can you talk about that particular area and maybe give some examples how that may affect a nurse's ability to do their job well?
This is where a culture of reporting is extremely important, because quality and risk management is about three main things. It's about 20 things, right? But protecting your patient, protecting yourself, and protecting your organization. In order to do that, you have to document your incidents. For instance, I'm caring for a patient that came in with a significant medical condition, and I'm caring for them in the ICU. And that patient was made NPO, which means nothing by mouth. And they continue to consume soda or cookies. And actively, unfortunately lowering the expectancy for them to survive their stay. They may die. There's having that conversation with them. If you keep doing this, you may die. Like, I can't keep up with what you're doing to actively hurt yourself. And having that family and patient fire me because they don't want to hear it. So I go into the medical chart and I just say, family is upset with me for providing education, right? And I walk away. Well, that patient dies, and all of a sudden that family's suing the hospital and they're naming me specifically. they're having a negative outcome, right? There's because
agree.
they're actively killing themselves, and when somebody dies, there's very negative for the family, of course. They're likely to sue, not likely.
What
They
you're saying is where if you would have taken the time to do an incident report, you would have given all the details of what happened there, leading up to the patient being at risk and the patient's decision to fire you as their nurse, right?
So as a nurse, I didn't see the value. The organization that I was with didn't care, right? They were just like, just put it in the notes. Don't worry about writing on a piece of paper to then file in somebody's mailbox for them to look at it in 2 weeks. It was write a note and just move on. What I should have done now, having been a risk manager for a long time, quality leader, right? I should have documented an incident. There's family complained, family was mad, family fired me. Patient unhappy, patient, there's non-compliant with healthcare, non-compliant with their medical care. Here's what I did to ensure the patient's best possible outcome. Patient has the right to choose to do whatever they want with their body.
Right.
I just need to document that they are choosing to hurt themselves actively, and that is on them.
Yeah.
They have
That's
been
good.
counseled, they're of right state of mind. I now am waiving essentially my liability. There's in this case, because now my documentation is going to be better than the plaintiff documentation. And
I
that's
got a really important question, Rob. I got to ask.
Wow.
Yeah.
All this. Really important question. And Timothy, I hope I'm not cutting you off on this.
No,
one.
you're good. That was great. Thanks, Rob.
So what we're saying is, nurses, protect yourself.
Yeah.
Work with quality. Use your incident reporting. Do what you can when things are happening around you, because you just don't know.
No.
That might be the thing that saves you from some kind of negative case or claim or what have you that affects your job. So my question is on systems. I'm going to pivot to systems. How do systems potentially play a negative influence on nurses being able to do this?
I thought of a great example of that as I was thinking about that from our rehearsal. So when I was in nursing school, there's one of my instructors was being sued. Because she was a nurse at bedside and a negative patient outcome occurred. They could not find the paper incident report that she filled out from 6 years prior or 5 years prior, whatever it was, because they didn't have adequate quality management within their organization, right? They didn't have adequate systems. They had papers in binders. That's a huge.
Well, that's the extreme case of.
Unfortunately, Gary, it's not extreme in some healthcare sectors. They're still doing it.
Wow.
I know that every other sector of the world is leaps and bounds beyond where we are in healthcare. And I love that you're disappointed, right? And like baffled by it, because it's not okay. That we are so far behind when patients' outcome are at stake and we cannot get good quality data. What
we're saying is that manual obviously could put a real kibosh on a nurse's ability to protect themselves, or putting their nurses not protected when you're going down that path. Now, we have talked about before, many of the big name incident reporting systems create a problem for nursing because it takes so much time to use the system.
So that's a very good point. Before I was educated in this space, when I was new, my early 20s, right? There's an incident report didn't feel important. So did I take the time to either fill it out well because it was 20 minutes worth of documentation, or did I take the time to do it all because, you know what, it's fine, I told the doctors, I'm not worried about it. Or honestly, it's just a lot of my colleagues are like, I'm not filling out an incident report. That's ridiculous. I don't have a half hour. My patients need me, and I haven't even had a chance to take a sip of water today. Incident report is the last thing that I care about.
Well, you guys know that I had my hip replaced recently back in January. And of course, I took that as the opportunity to ask every nurse everywhere about how they're dealing with incidents. And I was shocked how universal it was that it took so long to get an incident reported. And many of them said that when I'm having a tough shift and I'm near the end, sometimes I just say, well, maybe it wasn't that important. And I just go home.
Yep.
versus taking the time to make sure that every incident is reported, that they're witness to. It's remarkable to me. We are now in our last 5 minutes, Rob. What kind of questions do we have from the audience? Maybe we should take that time now.
Right now, all of our questions are, hey, I'm here. There's and I am listening actively.
Okay.
But there's no direct questions. Most of our questions look like they'll probably come after. Which is fine. So we will get on. There's periodically. And we will address all the questions in LinkedIn itself.
Very good.
Before we move, I do have one last question, if that's okay to ask, because I think this is really going to be helping, since we're focused on nurses. This is a National Nurses Month, and thank you to all of our nurses that have contributed in any way, shape, or form to patient care. We all understand that we could not function in the world of healthcare without our nurses. So we're so grateful for the work that you do day in and day out, through just everything that's going on in each of the individual respective organizations.
Absolutely.
Rob, what do you feel would be a way, or from your perspective, how can nurses advocate and maybe contribute to that culture of safety? For that nurse that's like, maybe I'm new in the organization, I don't really feel that I can make any type of contributions. They can, but from your perspective, how can they make that conversation that's needed, or have that conversation that's needed to improve the overall culture of safety for their organization?
Be loud. So we saw it during COVID. Nurses have the ability to be loud, and nurses have a lot of leverage. Nurses are truly the backbone. And I don't mean to speak for myself, but I am a nurse and I know the work that they have to do. Nurses are the backbone of healthcare. What better structure there's to force change than the backbone? So be loud. Tell your administrators that you want there's good quality in your organization. You can work anywhere as a nurse. Tomorrow you can have a brand new job. There is a massive need. Tell your supervisors, tell your managers, tell your administration, you want a system of quality. You want something that's going to protect your patients. You require something that is going to protect yourself, because there's no reason for you to go to jail because the other side's documentation is better than yours because your hospital failed you. Be loud, tell them what you need, and it's a need. You need to protect yourself and your patients, and advocate for strong quality programming.
Well, Rob, we never gave you the opportunity to ask a question. So I'm going to give you a choice. You can either ask a question or you can get the last word. What would you like?
I have a lot to say on this topic. I feel very strongly about quality, risk, and compliance. But I also by trade am a nurse. So I do want to speak to all of the nurses that may be listening, and all of the people that will listen to this, that are deciding authorities on how they are going to protect their organization, their patients, and their nurses. But please protect your nurses. Please protect your patients. And by doing that, you are protecting your organization. Nurses, please document very, very thoroughly, because often the better documentation wins the case, whether you're an auditor or a court of law. Document all of the facts, and document so that you can tell that story as clear 4 or 5 years from today as you can today. Advocate for strong quality systems that allow you to do that. You actually have the power. We've seen it in COVID with increase in compensation to truly compensate for the level of work that nurses are doing. Staffing laws are coming into place. There have been a lot of legislation and bills coming out because of nurses being loud. So please be loud about quality, risk, and compliance.
Outstanding. That is great advice.
Absolutely.
Rob. Great advice. If you are a nurse, or anyone else out there who is up against these kinds of situations, or maybe you're concerned that you're being placed at risk because quality is not having your back or what have you, please do not hesitate to reach out to us, to our panel of experts. We're glad to be able to do what we can to point you in the right direction with some solutions. We may even at Aperitisoft Healthcare have a solution of our own that we can bring your way. So please do not hesitate to do that. Do we have any final questions that we can field before we close out, Rob?
So Dr. Flake has made a statement that I fully agree with, and a question. I wonder about how simple incident reporting is for nursing. If difficult, no one, nurses or other staff will complete incident reporting forms. Absolutely. I know we barely touched on that during this podcast, but if you've had a hard shift, which most nursing shifts are hard, EVS, environmental staff, their shifts are hard. People don't want to sit down and take 20 minutes to document incident. So quality is not improving and risks are staying there. So I agree. There's a simple reporting system that allows you to document everything within 2 minutes. Is really what we're looking for. And that is something that we can talk to you about. And then I love the comment that it has to start in the C-suite. We have preached a culture of risk and quality and compliance. If the culture is not there, there is no quality improvement. The nurses are at risk and so are the patients. And we have one last, the most important question. What is the organization's culture of safety? Again, fully agree. How long does it take and what should I expect when entering an incident report? You should be under 5 minutes in documenting an incident report. The follow-up quality and risk management is the responsibility of your quality risk and compliance leaders to follow up with you, close the loops, close the gaps, and gather necessary information to protect your patients and your nurses. There's, sorry that I'm flying through so fast. These are wonderful. Safety should be a priority for all leadership. If it's not a priority for leadership, it's not a priority for your team. Nurses are at risk, patients are at risk. We'll address these more in detail. And also all levels of care should be entered, absolutely, including near misses. All near misses could also be entered in because that is an indicator that risks will happen later, and we want to protect both patients and nurses.
Correct.
That is, sorry, I flew through those really fast, but these are wonderful questions that came flowing in. I love the engagement, and we will absolutely follow up with everybody.
Yeah, look for our follow-ups, guys. We will make sure that we respond to everyone who has commented or asked questions. Continue to ask questions even after the podcast is over. We'll try to get to everything we can. Thank you for participating today. We very much appreciate it. Your support is helping to drive us forward, and it's been wonderful out there. We thank you for everyone participating in these podcasts. Next time, we're going to talk about disparate systems. So this is something that's been popping up as being an issue over the last several podcasts. So we decided that next month, we're going to tackle it head on. So hopefully you'll join us next month as well as we talk about that and just how it's creating problems for healthcare quality and clearly putting hospitals at risk when these systems are disparate like this. Any other final comments from the panel?
We have some wonderful collaboration with people supporting our messaging. So thank you all so much for that.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, everyone, thank you for joining us today, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month, the third Wednesday of the month. What is that date, by the way, Rob? Do we know what that date is next month?
I do. There's next month. I believe it is on the 26th.
The 26th of June. So we'll see you then, everybody. Thanks again.
Take care.
Bye-bye.